Hello, welcome to this online event by Bergen Kunsthall. We invited the Oslo-based organization Tenthaus to join us today. And initially, this was planned as a live event here at the Kunsthall, or at least as a hybrid event. But due to the tightened restrictions in Oslo, we had to reschedule it completely as an online event. And Tenthaus will join us only digitally. The event takes place as part of the program of events for the exhibition by Jef Geys, who worked for more than 30 years as a middle school teacher in his hometown Baalen, while also exhibiting internationally. And this exhibition runs until 5th of April this year. Tenthaus is an artist-run organization that focuses on artistic work in schools, and we wanted to make that connection as in the framework of this exhibition. Together with artists and groups, the organization plays an active role in its community, which combines artistic practice with social activism. Tenthaus was initiated in 2009, and they run their own space in Oslo, where they show exhibitions as well as the broader field of discursive activities such as radios, dinners, workshops for young people, residencies, events, and other collaborations. And many projects by Tenthaus happen in close collaboration with Sophienberg Skole in Oslo, which is close to the location of Tenthaus space. The discussion today will happen over Zoom and will include also several video contributions. And we invited Tenthaus to unfold the various levels of the activities and discuss their interest in pedagogy and their work as artists in schools, as an institution, as a collective, and also as an artistic practice, an artist group, so to speak. And in addition, Tenthaus will give a glimpse into the international network of collaborators and sibling practices, with some of which they realized projects in Oslo. The event today is hosted in Oslo by three of Tenthaus' current core members: Mecho Rapela, who's initially from Córdoba in Argentina and working with Tenthaus since 2016. Then Helen Eriksen, who's one of the founding members of Tenthaus and the director of the current board. Helen is a visual artist who was born and raised in Liverpool in the UK. And she's now living as a visual artist and educator in Oslo. And then third, Shahzad Malekian, who's a curator at Tenthaus. She's also working as an interdisciplinary artist, working with video, performance, and sculpture or installation. In the video by Tenthaus, there will be also further people appearing: Matilde Balatti, Eba Moy, Stan Dean, Ida Uvos, Nikhil Vetukatil, and Stefan Schröder. And then, as I mentioned, there will be three further video contributions by former collaborators who I also want to quickly introduce or welcome: Gabo Kamnitzer and Mehdi Torkaman Momeni. They're artists, educators, and researchers working with pedagogical models, often in collaboration with children and young people. And they both worked on the project The Camouflage Society, happening in 2018 at Tenthaus. Then Annelies Kogan, an Oslo-based artist who realized a film work on a 1927 mural at Hersleb High School in Oslo, together with Tenthaus. And finally, Pablo Helguera, born in Mexico City, who's an artist, performer, author, and educator, who worked from 2007 until 2020 as director of adult and academic programs at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. And he's currently an assistant professor at the College of Performing Arts at the New School. Yeah, welcome to this event of various contributions. It will take in total around 1.5 hours, and I'm curious about the discussion afterwards.
I see Tenthaus as a part of my artistic practice. For me, running an institution has developed into an integral part of my artistic practice. I'm motivated by the discussion of the institution's role in the public domain. For me, running an artist-run space means setting an agenda and defining a solid platform in relation to the narrative of the space. Here I am a part of defining what art is, how it's shown, and who is included in the public space. In my artistic practice, class and representation have been a long part of my practice. Here I have seen class as a term used for division into economic and social criteria, and where the arts and culture sector is largely homogeneous in relation to this. Presently my focus has been what will give underrepresented groups access to the art scene, and how can the art scene and art education as well become more representative in the society at large. My aim, I really want to link the development of this field of art and into critical thinking about norms, periphery and the center. And I also think that this really can give insight into my own position, and I kind of somehow my motivation in working with art and Tenthaus is an institution is to ask people to look at their own privileges based on what you represent and what I represent in this system that surrounds us in the Nordic countries. So somehow working with Tenthaus as an institution for me is about creating a more accessible field of art. Firstly, I see Tenthaus as a long-term development. I see it as an experiment and research. And by working in a collective, it's a really, you could say, engaging way of trying out these in collective ways of thinking and working together. How is it possible even? So I mean I've learned a lot from this, and Tenthaus is in a really interesting, you could say, expanding period where the collective is growing. Our I mean all our different ways of working in the collective is somehow it's really a learning situation for me being in this collective. I also see that how we are working publicly in reaching out to schools where we are having workshops is also part of working in a collective way by engaging students and other artists into working with schools. I see this way of working as a sharing of knowledge, where we are kind of jumping over the entire Western canon and the kind of the educational way of working with art and art history, and rather going directly into the content of art and the content of looking at art in a way, and how we kind of perceive it together with the students. So somehow I see Tenthaus as an artistic and at the same time educational platform, And this way of collective way of learning is something that really inspires me as an artist. Thank you.
Yes, today we have a kind of time travel back to the year 2009, and at the very spot we stay in front of Sinsen skole. It's a school, a public school in Oslo, and I think it's from the first grade, at least in these days. It's still, I think, first till 7th class. So the reason why I came here to this place in the context of this presentation for the in Bergen, it was because I wanted to talk a little bit about the very beginning, the very first years. Even though it's also an anniversary, this year, 10 years ago, we had our first exhibition at Tenthaus, another place, another venue. But 2 years before that, Ebba, Helen and me, we met at this school. We didn't know each other too much, so we kind of were saying hello for the very first time, at least me and Ebba, or at least we have common friends, and Ebba, I have seen her around in the art scene, in the Oslo field, in the art at openings and stuff, and Helen I didn't know at all. So that what happened, Ebba invited me, Helen, and also Geir Tore Holm and Søssa Jørgensen to join a workspace, a studio. And the studio was a rundown metal workshop, so it belonged to the school. It's not here anymore, we just checked that, it's taken away. The headmaster of the school asked Ebba if that space would a nice studio for her and for some colleagues and friends, and she said yes, why not. And the deal was actually to not pay money, but give some, organize some workshops for students and so on. So we said yes, and we met, and we had a nice place, and we met there on a regular basis, and suddenly we discovered, wait a minute, we are still artists, but our studio now is in a public space, on the very ground of a public school. So what does this actually mean to us as artists? Is this something special? And it didn't need the long discussion to find out it is special. In the context as, when you work freelance as an artist, you are related to the art fields, and the art field is related to each other. It's not so much, it's a kind of like a unhidden border between, as I feel it sometimes, too much the general public. As long as you're not Marcel Duchamp and all the big names, they gather a lot of crowd. But for artists like us, not so much known, it's hard to break through to the general public and to this audience, and especially to young people, which now just leave this school. So, and both Helen, Ebba and me, in earlier projects of our own, we always try to involve young people in the art production, in discussions, in the making of art. And so when we met here at this school, we found out that's actually a nice opportunity to join energy, to build this small collective, and getting started with projects, talking to the students, and get them into our production, at least as much as we could. So of course the very first year it was new for us to be an artist at school, to have this daily base there, and to meet like now with all the restrictions. You can't be here after 9 o'clock in the evenings and all this. But anyway, it was a really important experience, and from this very first meetings, I feel we're still kind of gathering the energy, and we still, I think it was like our philosophy started here, that we saw this need, the possibility and the urgency to make connections between the art field and the general audience, and especially the young people, which we feel are most important to integrate in art projects and also open up the doors. You know, all these institutions in art institutions in the world have one just big questions: how to generate more audience. And when you, in the very beginning, through making of art, are able to involve young kids and, you know, young students into your studio and your production, then it's a big treasure. So we felt that's a huge opportunity for us. On the other side, it's also an opportunity for them, because the public school system, unfortunately, it's good in Norway, but it's not good enough. So it's always demand on meeting possibilities between artists and on young people. So the opportunity for them were there as well when we came here, and we just, you know, put together some workshops and met these people and these kids, and were just having a lot of fun. Yeah, so that's the us. I still feel it's, you know, 12 years ago. The situation, the school is still there, the workshop is turned down, but the collective is still growing. Now we are not 3 people anymore, we are, I don't know, 14, and it's still a very big demand on possible collaborations between artists and students. So that's why I think when we talk about the institution Tenthaus, what is the thing about it, you know? Why does it work, or why is it still important to be part of this collective? It is because we need to get our art practice involved, intervened into these school situations. It doesn't mean that we need to change the way we see art, but what we really need to change is the way we address how to address art projects. Who do we really want to have into the space to see the art? You know, I always thought, I mean, as more important the art critic and the collector and the director of the institution is seeing my work, that as better it is. But I think as important it is to get in the young people and see these projects and doing something together with them. So that's why I think Tenthaus is still alive, and it's doing fine, and I'm really proud to, you know, thanks to Ebba that she really saw something which I still wonder why she asked me, you know, or Helen, and this is really great, I think. To make this connection between people, you know, to connect people and on any level, and art is such a nice medium to use to connect people and trying to work together and you know, discuss issues of importance and discuss issues of importance when it comes to society and integration and all this, you know. So I think that is what I can contribute to this presentation. Yeah.
We started because we had a really good space, and it was Stefan who says, you know, this space is so good, it could be a gallery. And then, you know, then it was out there. Somebody had said it and we were thinking about it, so we created a group exhibition with people from everywhere, actually, from our like what we knew from our backgrounds or whatever, and who we would like to invite. I invited an artist from Merseyside, where I come from in the UK, that I've never even met, you know. So suddenly he got this exhibition in Oslo. He was like, yes. But we kept on exhibiting because working with children isn't a good thing to do. So we understood that artists needed to like something else for their career, rather than just going into our project and being in our project. They also needed to get something else out of it. I mean, I've talked to other curators too, and they say like, oh, you know, we've got hardly any money and the artists are coming here, so we need to make a good book. That's the least we can do to give the artists something of substance for them when they're putting so much work into it and we're not paying properly for it. So I suppose in a way it's the same sort of mentality, like you giving something back for like this trade. So we were inviting artists in to come and exhibit with us and for us, but at the same time to do workshops with the kids. And sometimes it would be like a very organic thing that would be happening, and other times it was artists that never worked with this age group before that we had to do a lot of mentoring with and stuff. But it's been an organic thing, and after a while we stopped inviting people and people started inviting themselves. So people started seeing us as a gallery space, so we needed to do something with that. So then we started this toolkit thing to put the pedagogy back into the frame again. And I think people even now still don't understand how much of the work or the way we think is based on this social pedagogy. I don't know. I think it's perhaps a bit under-communicated. At this moment in time, I would say that I have different collective practices. So I very rarely work by myself anymore because it's a bit boring, actually. And not boring, but like the development goes really slowly. I mean, when there's 5 of you in a room or 6 of you in the room, then there's so much energy that things take on a momentum of themselves. And I think when you've worked collectively for so long, then you can just be with the momentum. You're not trying to keep hold of a baby and keeping your baby afloat. Like the projects becomes the baby in a way. So I think the longer I've worked collectively, the more I've like understood is like it's just easier to work this way, for me anyway. Being a safe space, I think from my background, I come from a really working class background where to go into a gallery would be not the thing to do. You just do not walk into it. I mean, there's got really big doors and they've got people who look like policemen in there. It's like, why would you want to go in there? So for me, it's one of the things. I was working in these schools, and I chose to work in these schools because I was really interested in what the kids had to say. So when we started our collective practice in the schools, it was like, what can we bring? What can we bring to them? And I think it's this idea of that door is always open. You just have to know how to push it. And I think that's, for me, that's one of the most important things, that the kids go into the room or the people go into the room and they can actually articulate something about their own lives through the art. The reason why I got interested in art was I had to go into a maths class at school, and I really hated that class. So every time the class was on, I had to find a place to hide, so I didn't go to it, and I ended up the one place where they would never look, and that would be the City Museum. So that's like, actually it was out of desperation that I opened the door. So, and I think like that's a really bad way to go into an art space. It's like, I'm in here hiding from my teacher. I think as a newcomer to Norway, it's like you don't know what these buildings are.
No.
And you don't know, especially in, like you were talking about, the elitist art world. When we meet kids who have who've been here their whole education, they come into the art world with, oh yes, this is Edward Munch, and then we take our kids to see something and go, yeah, but you know, she looks really unhappy, you know. So they go into the depth of it. We don't do art history or anything with them. We just like start the conversation where it is. They start the conversation, in fact. Well, I hope so anyway. But I don't know, I have trouble with this word institution, because it's like something very inflexible, and I think the collective and what we're trying to do at Tenthaus really needs flexibility. If you're not flexible in a collective, it's not going to work. So I think this institution, it's like, it can work so long as it's small and flexible. As soon as it gets too bureaucratic, I think then we're going to be an institution.
Yeah.
Well, for me, is this the collective needs to be has to be a learning space, because we're learning about each other and the like areas that we're going into all the time. So it's not a fixed thing. But in that way, as a learning space, we have to be really generous with each other, I think, and realize that like we are just we're going to do stuff that we shouldn't be doing all the time.
Yeah, and forgiving.
Yeah, or like sort of you do people do stupid things, and especially and you're doing it in front of 14 people.
Yeah.
It's not as if you're in your studio and you're making a really bad painting.
Yeah.
It can really fall flat.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's one of the nice things with Tenthaus is like we take risks and we back each other up when we're taking the risks as well. So there's this momentum. It's like, I think this Norwegian word tillit, like confidence in each other, is really, really important. When we started, we had no idea of a time scale, and I was always like, this could be something really different if we wanted it to be. And then I think as soon as we started getting funding and realized like, we are in fact onto this good trajectory here, then we decided, okay, well, we need something that will outlast us, I think. And for me, that's like the most important thing that has happened to Tenthaus has actually happened in the last 12 months, when all this new energy sort of came into the room, and it's sort of, I wouldn't say it's exploded, but it's like finding different directions, and it's really, really interesting. I love it.
The feeling of Tenthaus is that of a multi-layered exhibition space, art collective, artist-run space, and no-profit art gallery. As an artist-run space, Tenthaus is the result of artistic practices that come together to express a common perspective. The role of Tenthaus artists is a peculiar trait to observe. For me, it is interesting to think about the intersection between art making and institution building and managing. Sometimes these two tend to overlap, while sometimes the gap between the two becomes wider. It is noticeable for me how the participation of artists at Tenthaus varies according to their current needs and states. When they come to Tenthaus, they bring their own projects and their expectations, and when they leave with a multitude of new inputs and ideas. It is a process-oriented form of participation. Looking from the outside, from an artistic perspective, it is hard for me to distinguish when the collective work is feeding the artistic one and vice versa. To the point that I feel hard to distinguish the border between everyday life and artistic practices. Where does one end and where does the other one start? I guess it's because the practice of the people that work at Tenthaus is about the people, and artists live the art from the inside out. Artists connect, share, bridge, activate, and think, incorporating the other into the self. The relationship that artists have with Tenthaus is obviously related to the essence of Tenthaus as a collective. I see Tenthaus as an organism that needs all its parts, its organs, to function in the best way. It also needs nourishment and contact with other organisms, if we can continue on this line. Being part of a collective, so for me it's both giving and taking. It's more than a job, it's being part of a whole giving process where one gives part of oneself to the group, covering the steps that others cannot take and vice versa. Being part of something bigger than ourselves, it's rewarding. It's rewarding because we are able to create our own roles in a collective group. In a time where individualism becomes more a characteristic of our daily life, I think it is necessary to have collective groups in order to define ourselves in relationship with each other. As an institution, Tenthaus engages with artistic activism. I think this is the most characteristic side of Tenthaus. Tenthaus goes beyond the institutional practices, constantly providing different platforms for non-judgmental frameworks where free thinking is encouraged. The process of this disruption of preconceived ideas and hierarchies is my favorite one, as it gives the feeling of losing reference points. Questioning and reconstructing these reference points is part of what we do during the discursive program at Tenthaus. During these times, Tenthaus, the institution, questions the status quo of things by engaging with different actors and facing reality. Is it the one we want? What can be discussed and what can be improved? The fact that the discursive program is continuously growing is because we want to expand beyond the local and beyond the art interested. A particular example of artistic activism is that of workshops in schools that have been a central part of Tenthaus' identity since the start. Activism in the context of workshops takes the form of creative processes and discussions about various themes. To conclude, I see Tenthaus institution as a big net connecting its members, artists, the community, as well as ideas, events and projects to widen its reach and impact.
I like to think of Tenthaus as a garden, or a gardener's club. To me, it's interesting to reflect on the history and transformation of this garden rather than its origin. It's really its history that has shaped it. And as Helen said before, when Tenthaus started out as a project in schools, the founding artists weren't completely aware of its potential. The potential for a garden to expand and transform its orientation. This garden can't really be identified as any particular historical garden style, with its many exotics continually negotiating the focal points. However, it does remind me of the gardens of Real Alcázar in Sevilla, Spain. There, garden plants have been added to the original over time, in line with the vision of the different gardeners gardening the garden. This history grants the garden a unique dramaturgy. Observing Tenthaus projects is like taking a walk through that garden, trying to understand one plan before suddenly picking up on something interesting and walking into the next. It's amazing to me when a project, a practice, a collective, or even an institution can occupy these different plants and still deliver a coherent garden. This is only possible thanks to the continuous interest and effort put in by our gardeners. It matters what gardens garden gardens. It matters which tents house tenthausers. We're all in search of meaning and nothing is certain. In every project we aim to listen to the artist and work together to produce a culture shaped by all types of means of production. All sizes tools for all kinds of moods. The tenthausers develop their personal meaning of Tenthaus by opening it up for the input of everyone in the collective. I feel like one of the goals of the collective is to cultivate the art of art collectives by committing to challenge what that means and how it informs our collective practice. We commit to engaging each other in critical conversation on the various aspects of art production inherent to our collective practice. To Tenthaus. I Tenthaus, we Tenthaus. No Tenthaus without us, and that's a defining aspect for the profile of our institution. We are noticing how we are different generations of tenthausers now. But even though degrees of engagement of individuals within the collective vary, our ways of working keep the institution from becoming impersonal to us. Tenthaus is a garden of personal and collective values, of artistic and social experience, like an organism that's never not transforming. Imagine swapping gardens with 14 gardeners. You never know for sure what you'll cultivate next, but you need to trust these other gardeners in order to continue.
For me, Tenthaus as an institution, it's the way that it's working or the way that it's functioning. It's not completely into this conventional hierarchical understanding that I have from the institution. You know, like for example, when we are deciding, we are doing it collectively. When we are, we still have like responsibilities. We still have like a kind of teams that they are focusing on a different aspects of the institution, but still the whole process is kind of going through the collective. So for me as an institution, Tenthaus is the institution that trying to break this hierarchy. Like it's a constant process. It's like every day practicing it and then bring it to more to a horizontal way of thinking and doing in relationship to the people that they are working here, or even in relationship with the people that they are inviting into the gallery. Even like for example, if we are inviting artists to come and have an exhibition here, it's not just like one or two person that they are responding or in connecting with them. They are like the peoples for different aspects. So it's very funny because sometimes they get confused, and it shows that this is not the way that they experienced it before. It means that like maybe it's not the things that they are experienced in the other art institution or galleries or museums, but at the same time it's very interesting and very like it makes me happy that it feels that it means that we are working in a kind of more horizontal way, that like there is too much people for contacting them. If you're like it shows that we are kind of doing, or we are kind of in a track that we want to be. I started the experience of being in a collective like when I was in Iran, and I think I was very kind of privileged to be part of this collective and then get get kind of introduced to the way that what collective is, because like it was not the way that I could practice it or like get knowledge about it in my education or in my practice. So from that time, I think being in a collective in Tehran in my early stage of my practice is started to shift or to kind of form my practice as an artist. You know, I educated in a very conventional visual art, like in a sculpture making, and then just after finishing my school, I just become part of this collective, and I've experienced being in and out for like almost 5 years, and then after that I just continue my practice to come here to study art and public space. So I can see that it's maybe, however, I can't really in the beginning it wasn't very obvious or very clear for me that like how the collective it's shaped my practice, or what is gonna be the effect of being in a collective in my practice. But when I'm looking it back and I just like look at how my practice changed during all these years, I can see the trace and the kind of impact of being in a collective. So I can say like being in a collective and practicing a collective way of thinking and doing and writing, it's like a kind of methodology for me. So this methodology is what that I can get it and I can bring it into my work. And then and being in a collective is just like constantly practicing with the methodology of thinking collaboratively, thinking participatory, and I can relate these two things together. Artist in a school is completely new thing for me, because and it's very interesting because like it's the kind of, maybe I can't say it's a reason that I'm here, but it's also very much how it's related to my practice. When I was talking, being like I started from the collective, like shifting towards the art and art in public places and in like a socially engaged art, and then shifting towards the being like having the collaboration and participation as a methodology, and then shifting after that like being artist in the school. So like I have never made before like a piece for the children, but now I don't know, it was kind of coincidence by starting here in the Tenthaus. I just see the possibilities of bringing my last installation, for example, into the school, and I start talking with them, and I just a little bit start experiencing with them, and it's very, very interesting for me because one of the subjects that I'm really interested in is the merging public art with alternative pedagogy, and this is the things that kind of I started experience with it when I started being in a collective in Tehran, when it was completely out of or like a conventional universities or places that we can getting knowledge. And then I just like slowly I started to read and get more knowledge about the different way of pedagogy and the like alternative pedagogy, and then I think that it's a very interesting place to not experiment with. Like I don't want to look at it from the kind of hierarchical point of view that, oh, interesting, we go to the school, we are working with the children, we are bringing our knowledge in a like alternative way, but it's a very interesting place to be in and to have like these kind of this honest relationship and more horizontal relationship with the children, because this is possible. This is like the way that they are open, they are honest, they are responding to your thoughts in a very natural and very rough way. So this is the field that I would like to experience more and more, and I'm just kind of thinking that it's very natural that it comes into my practice more and more project that I would like to explore it in relation with the schools and in relation with the children and in relation with the kind of having a long-term relationship with the children, not just very short encounter.
I mean, I've only been at Tenthaus for a short time, but I think I've seen the ways that it's like a home for many artists in Oslo and elsewhere, and also like a friend to so many people. And I think what Tenthaus does is whatever resources they have, they share it out, and they're also just very supportive and caring in a way that I think a lot of like top-down institutions struggle to be. And I think also, yeah, that I forgot what I was gonna say. Yeah, that because they're an artist collective, they also understand like what artists need and how best to support them. So I think that is really helpful as an institution. Yeah. I think what's exciting about Tenthaus is that it's very hard to categorize what they do, and it doesn't fit into like kind of conventional or normative ideas of what art and how to practice it should be. So I think they've been around for like 10 years now, and it never instead of narrowing down what Tenthaus is, it's always expanding and like taking more risks. So I think like the radio that I've been involved in is a good example of this, that you could just stay with what you know, but let's try something totally new and see how that can change everything else we're doing. I think it's very hard to like say it without it sounding cliche, but I think of all the collectives I know, like Tenthaus is really like the most diverse in terms of interest in all sorts of different ways. It's such a large collective too, that I think what is so exciting about that is that it's like it's kind of like democracy in action, or it's like working together is like a big part of what's so amazing about it, how to work with so many people with so many different ways of thinking. And I think what's really incredible and why it's so sustainable and things is also because it's a group of people who are not pushing their own personal agenda, or and there's a real like kind of supportiveness in the way that everyone is working, that means that no matter what you're doing, you have an equal say in everything. And I think that is very unusual for an institution or a workplace, that like there's a real like kind of flat structure. Yeah.
I guess it's hard to find like a place to start in describing what Tenthaus is, but often we've had this umbrella image that is some kind of facilitating place for making projects happen, or people come together to do artistic activity, or and in some way that's the, how to say, the institution part, is that it is this basis with several different platforms for making projects happen, or and making activities or events happen, and these platforms that could be the radio or the workshops or the exhibitions or some particular projects in public space or this pay and residency program, they involve a lot of artists and participants. So
so I see it as this umbrella with many different platforms, with many different people being involved in the activities. And then Tenthaus is also a place that people come together, and it has now also developed and grown into including more people in a sort of collective practice, which is really interesting, because in my head at least, traditionally the word institution and the word collective are opposites of each other, and this tension is really interesting because it keeps how to say, it keeps pulling each other and having some kind of tension that makes things never stand still. So there's always a development or a movement forward with what's going on. And then this moving forward means that it's always transforming or rethinking or reconsidering itself, and I think that's really healthy. That I don't see Tenthaus as a place that will ever be fixed and finished and this is what it is, and now we have done what we were meant to do, and then we just carry on because there's always another thing coming, or a new level or layer to add on top. And I think, this, I don't know if there's so much more I want to say even, but I think that this tension between the institution and the collective, and to have a collective practice, or it's all open enough so that people can come with their ideas and projects and proposals, and then they are considered, or it all sort of there's room for everything and anyone somehow. It sounds a bit idealistic, but I think it's true that it is room for everyone to contribute and have their say and do their thing somehow. So, yeah.
I think the artistic practice of Tenthaus is changing. It's always evolving, and it change every time that a new member comes in, and I think that's a very descriptive thing of Tenthaus, that it makes space to something new and somebody new. It's also very generous, since that it's changed almost immediately when they come. Somebody new comes, and it starts morphing almost instantly, and it means that for every new member of the collective or of Tenthaus, the artistic and practice is just changed towards an openness, and it's almost like it's very invisible in a way, but I can see it because I'm not an artist, so I always have the vantage point of seeing this transformation, and I don't know if the artists understand this shift in their practice, but in Tenthaus, I see it, and I'm always amazed about this generosity. It's always so nice to see that this shift happens time after time, because there were 3, and then we were 4, and then we were 6, and then we were 8, and now we're 14. I mean, it's and it has changed, but it happens every time. And when it happened with this conversation, because everybody asked a new question. So the new artist comes in, it comes this shift, And then they opened a lot of questions and those questions go to the institution. And that's where I'm more involved, or I feel that I have to receive those questions and try to answer them, but I try to make that we all have to answer this together, because we have to integrate the new member, but also change whatever we were doing, because these questions are usually related to who is not being represented, why they're not being represented, why are we lacking this, how can we do better this. So it's the members come, we shift on these questions, and with these questions we just we have to just learn what are we not doing. And this is what Ebba is always saying that it comes from Casco, like the unlearning. We think we know what we're doing until the new member comes, and then we don't. And when we don't know, we have to unlearn what we were so methodically doing and do it again. And this unlearning makes us a very porous, absorbable organism to integrate and grow and learn and nurture all these other channels that we're trying to do. But I think the most important thing is that the fact that when somebody new comes in, we acknowledge that we're not doing things right, we are missing something, and then but that happens when the new member. I think for me it is impossible to answer the three questions, like what is this and what is this and what is this, because I don't have any division. I have, like, for me, we are all of them, and we are I will not be able to go the three different ways. And it's also because I put myself very much in the outskirts of everything. I just see them from outside, because I try to see everything in the way because I don't know how to say this without saying I so much, but it's just I'm always trying to understand what's happening here, because we have to apply for money and explain ourselves and write the text and explain to the artist and understand why we're doing things. So I'm always trying to see everything from outside, from a point that I can have some perspective. I don't know if I managed to do that, because I'm very subjective towards Tenthaus. I don't think that anybody doing what Tenthaus is doing, and I think Tenthaus has the greatest collective ever. But it's we don't need to say that. But it's but it's from my perspective, it's ever evolving organism that it's expanding and growing with each member, with each exhibition, with each visit to the schools. The institution, I think it's Tenthaus as the institution is more is aiming to be a learning space. We are trying to learn. It's not we're trying to teach. It's not a teaching space. It's just a learning space. So we're trying to figure out together through exhibitions and through workshops and through dinners what is the next step, what is our role, how are we going to exist, how are we going to help represent the new artistic discourse or narratives that are coming, and they're not going to be heard because they're coming from a perspective that is not going, it's not ever going to be the main narrative in the ecosystem. So how are we going to represent those narratives and those discourses, and are we equipped to do that? And if we're not, what do we need to learn, and who do we need to talk with, and who do we need to include in this conversation to be able to learn and to go to the next step? And I think in that case, and this might this might sound bad, so you need to get this up. But I think sometimes the white cube experience in Tenthaus might not be what they're expecting from outside, of what is not expected from a white cube or gallery, because it's not only that we are experimental, but we are experimental in the point that the experiment or the learning process is more important, or could be more important, than the result of showed in the gallery. So we do this knowing, and we acknowledge this sometimes the learning and the experiment comes above the aesthetics experience. And for me personally, I'm okay with that, because I will always prioritize the learning experience more than the aesthetic one. And we have a lot of galleries in Oslo and Norway and the world prioritizing the aesthetics. So I think that to prioritize the learning and the research, it makes me very happy, and I think it makes us very proud.
Tenthaus has, we have been working as an artist group since almost 10 years, or maybe more. I kind of forget. It's a long time. It feels like a long time. And it started as an initiative at a school. And the thing was at that time in 2009, actually, was that me and some other artists found a space at the school which was empty. It was a workshop space, and it wasn't in any use of school. So somehow Tenthaus started as this. It's also about the changing of the kind of the, what do you say, the changing of the times, how art and arts and crafts has been slowly moving out from the school, and the spaces where they used to be have been empty for a while. So this school where I found the spaces was the school where my kids went to, Sinsen Skole, and this space wasn't in any use. They even had this place where you shape iron in this, where you have a fire shaping iron. No one is doing that anymore at schools. So in this space, I asked Helen and Stefan, which I was sharing studio with at that time, if they were interested to come and look at it. And together we found a way where we had an exchange with that school. So this exchange in the end was about us giving workshops to school, and they giving us a studio space for, you could say, for free, but the exchange wasn't done for free, because the work was kind of giving giving workshops. So I mean, this has developed into an interest of connecting artists to schools. So we kind of saw that when being there, we saw the kind of the need, also the contact with the students, which I kind of miss, because now Tenthaus, we have our own place. We're not situated at the school, but I mean, Tenthaus has developed into something else, because also in the end, after trying out being at 2 more different schools having studios, we found that being inside a school as artists also has its limits. We had to all the time deal with the rules of the school, the closing times, the fire exit rules, all these things that I mean, it's of course really, really important, but having an art practice makes it a bit difficult. So also we wanted to start inviting other artists, and that wasn't possible. The school wouldn't let any other in. So we started a gallery space, found a space of our own. And also I think Tenthaus then has developed into also being about making a platform in the art scene. And that platform probably it needs a space of our own somehow, which we can shape in the way we want to, and then also be going into a larger collective. So that's a little bit about the starting point. And I'm thinking about, I mean, then starting point, working in a school as artists and workshops. Maybe Matilde, you want to say something about the pedagogical context and the context working in schools?
Yeah, because I think even though we're not present, or we don't work from a school, but we most of the time travel to a school or move towards the schools we work at. I think what's interesting for me is that we bring with us a moment of break from the school routine that the children are used to, or the students are used to, and we bring with us a different way of approaching the school system, or the school day as they have it normally. So I think what's important in the pedagogical context is bringing a new way of thinking that goes beyond, and it's and in a certain way it's comes together with the way they learn during the school schedule. But we try to go beyond the teaching of right and wrong, because if we make art, if we make dance, if we make theater, there's no right and wrong. So we go beyond that dichotomy, which I think it's important for to learn, because we need to be used to interpret realities in different ways and not.
The things is also interesting for me, like after Eva and you talking, Matilde, is that a kind of these pedagogy approaches that we have, and it's that like a kind of also manipulating the hierarchy between the institution, the school, and then the teacher and the students and the rules, and then about this freedom that is nothing wrong or not is right, and what is not about that imposing or teaching or something to them, but it's also like sharing, you know, that the place, like the artists, when they are going to the school, they are not that they are going to teach the students how they draw a picture, or what is like this very classical way that we have, or conservative way that they approached art in the school before, or at least the way that I have experienced it. But it's more about that, just make a space, like just make a atmosphere or a place that these
artists and students meet each other, and then they start to talk and negotiate, and through this negotiation and talking, then the project has been happened, you know. I kind of see it like in this way. And it was also interesting when Ebba said that even as an artist working, having the studio in this institution, they were also have been kind of these kind of manipulating these not rules, but like a kind of these hierarchies. And then the way it was that, okay, now we are bringing the studio outside the school because of like these hierarchical things, but we are connecting to the school in a different way. Or like, for example, still I can see it like however you don't have the workshop Ebba in the school or like the studio, but you start to making it, you know, like in the project PN, you're just bringing the studio into like in kind of imposing it into the schools that they don't have the studio anymore.
And
yeah,
I
that's
think,
right.
oh, sorry.
Yeah, I can, if I just say a little bit about the P1, I think that's totally right. That's kind of the development of this idea of then starting inside the school, then being outside the school, and then want to reconnect to the school again, but then letting the artist have the key. And also when having the key, then you have the power somehow. So we are making this studio space and a workshop space, where we try to make best studio we can in a container kind of space, and the artist can decide when and where, how to let others in, and don't have to follow the closing, the fire rules, everything of the school. But anyhow, being close to a school and being where the kids or the students are, having their everyday life. So that I think that's also something. It's important also a part of this P1, the prototype we are making, is about showing that being an artist is also work, something that, it's a part of the society, to show that the artists, and usually artists go to studios in closed buildings, but this is a bit about opening up.
And I think what you, Shah, said about the hierarchy in the schools, by bringing, also a physical space for art and crafts, we sort of rearrange the hierarchy of subjects as well, of topics in the school. And that, I think, it's also quite different than, we're used to having some certain subjects that are supposed to be the ones that have more hours during the week, but by bringing something external and dedicating space and time to it, that really becomes a tool for kids that they can use in the school and outside the school as well.
Yeah, also that being inside the school is, that everyone has to go to school. So for me, connecting art to a school situation is opening up something, because not everyone is finding their ways to gallery spaces, not at all. And I don't think, maybe it is not for everyone, but I think art can be for everyone. Maybe not going to gallery space, but being inviting artists, making workshops, art projects inside the school situation, or like together with the school. Then you're then being inside the time schedule of the school, you meet everyone, so to say, even if they don't really decide to be a part of the workshop. So I think somehow we could say that we are forcing them into being a part of our project. But I think this is what the kind of key core thing is, also having a good relation to the teachers, actually, not only to the students, but to have this trust relation to the teachers, maybe not to the administration of the school, that's not so important, but the teacher that has this everyday contact to the class. I think that's kind of a key thing. And I also wanted to say something about hierarchies, because it's not only about hierarchies between, in the school, but also connecting to the art scene. I mean, that's totally, I think that was also a starting point, starting Tenthaus, that's working with kids has been kind of the lowest on the hierarchy in the art scene for a long time. And that also made us more interested in kind of trying to lift this up, and then also deciding to start a gallery space and try to make it, and being a part of the art scene, also inviting artists working with schools. It's almost been kind of a political thing towards the art scene, I think.
I think it's also very interesting when how this very wide range of artists that Tenthaus bring into the school, when they are kind of touching upon a different topics or a different methodology or a different way of working, is kind of, when they are working in a long relationship with the students, the students gonna see very different way of thinking, toolkits, and all of those things that they can choose like later on, that if they are going to work or what is work for them or what is not. But it was very interesting that it's not just like maybe one project or one artist, but it's just like a bunch of them, and then everybody has their own interest and their own concern. Of course, all of them is kind of more and less working with the subjects that maybe engaged, like it's about the socially engaged art and practice, but it's also the way that they are engaged with these social communities completely different.
And I think for students, to realize that there are different ways of thinking, there are different ways of doing things and using creativity or different way of thinking, and even on the long term, that's very important, and that is something that Tenthaus brings to schools as well. And but it does this not, as a reciprocal approach and process, because the artists go to the school and bring their suggestion, but it's of course necessary for the students to accept the suggestion and participate in it, because they are the ones that are gonna create and make the workshops, really.
That's totally true. And maybe it was, I don't want, maybe it's wrong to use the word force, but they can't really say no either, because it is a part of the school, their time schedule at school. So, and I kind of like that also somehow, because if we would have done this in their free time, then it's much more about class, socio-economical situation, how they can afford to take public transport wherever we are. The school is really about this democratic space where everyone is, and where we can reach out to those who maybe we wouldn't reach out to if it was on their kind of after school time. So it's not about force, but it's about opportunities, maybe. I don't know. Yeah.
Hello everyone, I am Annelies Kogan, and I'm an artist based here in Oslo. I must say this is quite a weird situation since I can't see you. I hope everyone is doing good and staying healthy. So I was asked to talk a bit about my project with Tenthaus and Haslep School here in Oslo that I started 2017, and I was invited to develop something, a relational project with a class of youth. I started with visiting the school almost every week, and I planned different workshops or different meetings, Prior to this, I've been teaching at schools as well as an artist, having projects, and maybe mostly with younger kids, but I think the methodology is the same, and I'm very comfortable in this class situation from before. So for me, I think the context was really really great, and I was super happy to start with this project. And I did talk a lot about myself as an artist and what I work with, try to introduce a bit like the contemporary context, and also of course my own national background, which is from Estonia and moving to Norway, and this whole identity change, which also those students that I work with really have, because many of them had multicultural backgrounds and refugee backgrounds, and some of them maybe not yet had learned Norwegian. So the communication between us was also quite special, since we couldn't often or sometimes talk a language. And this was also really important and interesting for me, since we could then try to work with different artistic methods, projects and research to actually be able to communicate in a way who we were. And the whole point for me was to focus on the students' backgrounds, what they're good at, what they like, what are they interested in sharing, and what they bring to Norway with them, and how can they express this through different artistic methods. So it resulted in a performance at the school, and later a film. And the process to all these different things that were shown and recorded were products of different workshops and meetings. So nothing was really planned, in the sense that one thing always led to another. And Tenthaus in this project is, of course, producers and them kind of mediators, and also the ones that transported me directly into the context and validated me. So with this youth, I think it's very important to be validated. You have to prove yourself to them, which is also, of course, totally normal, because this artist coming to them to school to ask them to do different weird things, that's not normal in a way. But I feel like more and more we established really great connections, and we still keep in contact. I did try to prove myself in many ways. I did push-ups, I joined the gym class, and I bought new sneakers that many of them really thought were cool. I tried to maybe improve myself also. I really tried to understand them and where they were coming from, and not push anything on them. And maybe I was thinking that they would want to share much more than they really did, and I guess that was kind of my bias of expecting a lot of enthusiasm, which wasn't really there in the beginning. But I think gradually, and as they could kind of choose where they wanted to go with my direction, it was really just our collaboration that led us to these different products, let's say, or poetry or texts, drawings. One student, he really liked to run, so I filmed him running, and that's in the film. Yeah, I think Tenthaus's role in this was crucial, because being artist by yourself and wanting to work with relational projects at school, for example, it's quite hard to get to in this way if it's not just like a DKS, a really pedagogical project where you tour the different schools, which I also do. I think they're a bit different. So my project here was more like validated from the beginning that why are you here? Oh, I'm with Tenthaus. Okay, that's fine. Like, what do you want to tell us, or what do you want? So let's try to work together. And we talked a lot of Norwegian, of course, so they also got to practice their language, and I got to really investigate who they were, where they were from, and that for me was really amazing and unique opportunity to get to know so many amazing and kind youth that really also showed me a lot of warmth and included me in their life, really. So for that, I'm forever grateful. Thank you everyone for listening. Hope you got a little overview of my project. All the best from me.
We're interested in this also from the perspective of our exhibition with Jef Geys and the central role that his work as a teacher has had for his own artistic work. In the exhibition, we present his work with schools as one way to engage with localized contextual systems of production and presentation. Others were bars, for example, or a wonderful project he realized as part of the biennial in Sao Paulo in 1991 in some less central neighborhoods. We had to think of Tenthaus as a somewhat related, although different context and time, for a start, approach. Where do you see your artistic context, collaborators, interest, and predecessors?
Okay, well, I can start there with like the art practice itself. I mean, I think one of the main things with art practice is that it wasn't an art practice before we started to go into schools as a group, as a collective. So I think the way working with schools and this collaboration and participatory practice, it's, for me anyway, it's shifted something in the way I don't work individually anymore. I work with a lot of different collectives. And we have, as a collective, we have in a way contextualized us like locally in Oslo, even though we have done projects outside of Oslo. Yeah, and collaborators, we have a lot of different collaborators, and it's always shifting. So I think we talked to Metro last week, and she said in COVID year we had 120 different collaborators that came through Tenthaus. So that's like really, really interesting, because it will probably be less than normal.
There were probably more as well.
Yeah, but the radio.
With the radio, some of the collaborators invited other people who weren't probably numbered, or.
Yeah. Stefan?
No, I think it's interesting to say what you said about when entering a collective and redefining your artistic praxis, that something changes, because I think you and both Ebba and you and me, we did individual collaborations, at least me, I remember at schools and even in Belgium at Turnhout in 1999. And I think it's it's really kind of strengthening the process when you work in the collective way. I felt coming into the Tenthaus practice and doing it together. It feels more natural, even though it has always been in my practice a nice kind of like additional segment of opening up my practice and opening up my ideas, and that much that others, collaborators, young people, students could contribute more than just like doing what I said as, you know, as the manager in this. So it's also this kind of thing, how to, where do you place your own artistic experience, practice, and relationship at that very moment when you meet young people and discuss what to do, you know. And that's actually what I think is always interesting, that you not come as an artist and say, we are going to do this and that, but that you rather go into a class and say, so what are you actually about? What do you think? What should we do, you know? So that was the point down in 1999 when I came to this school in Tenthaus, invited by a Belgian artist, Luc van Zoom. He was my teacher at the academy in Breda, and he said, yeah, you are invited. And I came from Dresden at that time, and I thought there's too little time, and it's too far away to, you know, just, and the context was not clear to me at all, that I just drove there without any idea. And that was finally, it was the turning point for this project, that we worked it out together with the students. So, and this is the Tenthaus way. I think also quite often that we not define it all the way, even though we have done this as well, and even though we go to this autumn exhibition and watch art together. But I think the most interesting parts in the Tenthaus way of working is when we kind of start from the scratch altogether. What do you think, Nikhil?
Yeah, I mean, the radio is starting from scratch, I think. That's something I think is very, I said it also in the video, but I think it's normally when you have a collective that has been around for very long, starting from scratch becomes harder, but it seems like Tenthaus is always like, rather than consolidating what it does already, it's always like, oh, let's try this, let's try a new building, let's try a totally different medium that we haven't been using, and I think that's really good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and there was a question about the predecessors.
Yes.
For me, I've been struggling to find predecessors in socially engaged art in Europe, because everything is in other languages than British, and in the UK we have a very strong tradition of community art. So I suppose that's where I would come from, but I think in the UK, community art is well at the time in the 90s was looked at as really looked down upon, as the same as these other pedagogical projects. And I suppose one of the biggest role models that was pushed forward would be Joseph Beuys. And even then it was difficult to find things on Beuys that weren't in German. So I don't think, and Nikhil, you've got like some predecessors as well in these collaborative works.
I'm not sure. I'll think about names. I mean, I'm sure there are. But yeah, exact projects, it's hard to say.
Because
but I was interested if for you, you know, like you're saying now, like when you started, maybe community engaged projects weren't maybe even now, like it's almost like there's renewed interest in them. And I wonder if the context around you and working in schools has changed, you know, just in time as well as, say, like compared to when Jef Geys was working to how you're working now. Is there like a big difference?
Well, I think perhaps one of the big differences is now sort of Tenthaus is a sort of a space of resistance, I think. There's a lot of things that we don't go along with, both from the art world and the world of school. And I think community art before would perhaps, I don't know, too much about Geys' project, but in a way, he could operate by himself. And I can't see that as ever being possible for us as individuals to get to the state where we can now make really big projects. I don't think that we would have ever got to that stage through being a community-based artist. So I think in a way there's a sort of a momentum with Jobbing, with working collective. Like how different it is from when we started 10 years ago. Well, I suppose,
like maybe no, sorry.
I suppose it's the fact that we've been doing it for so long, and that gives us the cred in a way. It's like we just keep on doing it, and like you say, it's a shapeshifter.
Yeah.
So I mean, and it's taking on the shapes of the people that are coming in and with the different interests or whatever. So it's a really flexible form. So,
but
yeah,
I think when you said that it's not possible to reach these large-scale projects, I'm maybe not totally agree. Even though I think we could focus altogether on that, and it would be possible, and we did, like the ones with Felder, or you know, some collaborations we had in the past. But what I think is now maybe even more a quality to not focus on the size of the project, but rather on, even though this you could discuss the number of collaborators, the number of schools, because what I see now the last years that we kind of spread all over our activities, inviting other schools and groups and having this parallel at the same time. So you actually never know who's in which project at the time. And I think this is a little bit funny, because then it's a little bit back that smaller groups are dealing with one class or one group of students. And then you're kind of back to your, like where I came from, my individual practice, that you kind of have more possibilities to shape it in the way you think. While like 5 years ago, everything was decided in the very group, and if not all were agreed upon this, the next way to go, then we wouldn't do it. While these days, I think it's quite some more space actually to create your own projects. I don't know how you see it, but I feel it's kind of became like that. And but this is, yeah, that is maybe a kind of also needed, because it's of course so many young people, and especially in this COVID-19 period where you're kind of you are not entertained by art at all, you know. So so that's just maybe needed to spread you around town and try to involve more students in the best way.
I guess the question asks also, like, you know, it mentions all these strange contexts that Jef Geys worked in, but I was really interested, like, if you can name or talk about like the weirdest contexts that Tenthaus has worked in, or like the strangest project environments? Have there been places maybe other than schools or working with school children elsewhere? Or?
I think one of the strangest projects that we had must have been Felder's project, when suddenly we were hotel owners.
Okay.
Yeah, outside Barcode, and we had booking systems and queues for people who were coming in, and we were on the aisle one day, and Hans-Jørgen Hamre rode over and started talking, and he had his friend with him. He said, yeah, we think this is really cool. We want a whole village out here, and we want to build this sauna. And if you've been down to Oslo now, you know, the place is full of saunas, you know. Yeah. So I think that it's sort of felt as imaginary there, and it's visionary there. It's like it really helped people like see that things were possible. And even for us, it's like, okay, we can open a hotel. We can do that, you know. And it would be the sort of thing, and I think we've been putting ourselves into strange positions in a school as well, like the like total craziness, where we were in Levanger, and Metro said that there's going to be a workshop, and she was going to manage everything, and we said, yeah, okay, are you sure? And yeah, it's going to be fine. And it ended up that it was like 80 kids in and out of this workshop situation, like must have been exhausting for her, you know. And it was, you know, like we put ourselves in these sort of challenging situations all the time, and it's good for us because we're always learning. But at the same time, you know, when you look back on it, it's like there is, as Metro says, like there is like a certain amount of craziness because you don't quite know, you know, like we're risk takers, I think. So yeah, and I think it depends who's in the group at any one time to how big a risk we're taking, because like if you get a lot of risk takers together, then the bigger the risk they will take.
Yeah. But what about you, Stefan? Because you seem to maintain more like an individual practice. Can you, when you look over your own drawings and other works, can you see like the way that, is it possible to see the way that the work in schools has changed that, or from maybe work you were doing before? Or?
Yeah, in some like projects related to public space, I always try to kind of open it within the process of the making. I'm kind of not alone, rather than, you know, that join forces and have young people in and do it together, kind of, because I think it's fun, you know, it's the best fun I know to produce with real materials on the spot, and to have this joy, you know, to give this joy further to new students. So, but it has changed my individual practice at the time, you know, then I would say maybe, you know, when you really punch out or go into new research, trying to end up with an idea for a new project. And it's also kind of like going to a monastery and trying to forget things, you know, and then to be open enough to really go in these inner dialogue. So it's both, actually. I'm kind of not defined too much how the way of working, you know, it's kind of like really elastic and flexible. So, but you know, I maybe the other way around, that I some of the projects on my own I brought into the collective and trying to test it there. And what do they think, especially with this, I have this long-term project now. It's about 30 years. I started with collecting these cardboard boxes and make them flat and use them as stencils. And I have thousands of them using for my drawings. And so I bring them sometimes to workshops and see what the kids and adults would do with them. Other than me, like, seeing the potential or showing the potential in this prefabricated materials, like, ready-made ideas, using ready-made materials into transforming them into projects and so on. So I'm I don't see this really impact of the Tenthaus way of working in my own practice, more than that I try to stay close to myself and do always the honest thing and the right thing at the moment, which then can turn out to be more or less anything. Yeah.
Yes, Stefan, I think in workshop situations, you're the person who we always look to think on his feet. Very quickly find solutions to practical. You think really three-dimensional and practical. So it's really fantastic having workshops with Stefan, because they're always successful.
I'm trained to improvise, because I'm from the former eastern part of Europe, from the GDR, and we didn't have that much materials. There was just a couple of things, and you always needed to rearrange them in order to get something new out of it. So, and I always think in my own projects, and also in the collective here, that it must be able to find a way to do exactly the project you want to do with the exactly material you have right now at the moment in-house. So just to, and that is like a strong concept in my own practice, to use what is there, and not, first make a budget, then a list of things to buy, and then get them, and then, store them, and then cut them, and all this. No, it's the other way around for my own practice sometimes, or most of the time, even though of course I also have bought materials, but and I think also this reusing or giving existing structures, even existing art, a new definition, a new context. I love to recontextualize art pieces which are about to get out of the system, thrown away. Commissions say this art is not important anymore, we don't need it anymore. So then I say stop, maybe we can change the context, and trying to get it into the dialogue of our time, and make it get seen from a different side. I had some projects like this, and then it's suddenly interesting. So that's why it's fun to minimalize your effort, actually, in a way, to just use what you have. And this is a nice way of showing young people that you don't need to have these huge budgets all the time in order to get done with things, or to make an idea clear, or having a good dialogue going on,
Yeah, that's very true.
I think for me, in my artist practice, Tenthaus has brought up lots of questions that I'm trying to work through, and I'm always working through, like, why am I here? And what happened in this particular constellation, and like to how groups work and how we work together through art. I think that's, like, for me, it's this possibility to learn something about the context that we are actually in. And it's sort of, for me, it's like it changes me as well, the whole time, because I gain more and more insight into how art actually works. at a very sort of deep and personal level for myself, and I see it in the students as well. You know, they're able to ask questions they couldn't ask before. So that was pretty deep, wasn't it?
Mm. Yeah.
Can you
Oh,
check the, is it recording, Helen, the thing here?
Yeah, it's like going ding, ding.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I think we talked for half an hour, maybe. That is more than enough for them.
Yeah. I'm not sure what the system is, who is going to edit this.
Yeah, that is actually a good question, because it's the final decision out of the material, what to choose then for the video. So, but I guess Metsu and Adriana, they have a dialogue, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah.
So maybe we don't make it too long.
Yeah, but Nikki, what's your impression of the, like for you, how does Tenthaus fit in with your context and your practice?
I think, like, I've started to notice that almost everything I've done is collaborative, but never with as many people as in Tenthaus. And that's interesting for me, like, yeah, just getting better at working in a group in all sorts of ways is like part of it, but it's a bit, I think I came into Tenthaus a bit blind, but I think that's also because I think in a very good way, like Tenthaus doesn't historicize itself very much, or like try and summarize or present what it is. So I know I've always seen like bits and pieces, but you know, there's still whole parts of what's going on that I haven't seen, and it hasn't been presented to me as something. It's like, get involved and then you will find out, but not hear a story about what this thing is meant to be about and what it's for and its purpose. And I think that's interesting. Yeah, it's like, I think it's a very important practice in so many ways, like just, it's so different to the kind of dominant way of working, I think, in Oslo. So even in this way that you're talking about, like start with what you have first rather than make budget, is very different to how most artists I know in my own peer group of thinking of a high budget project, apply to Kulturrådet and then make it. But it's but that's a more like kind of competitive system than, if ever, you know, developing the skills to see what you have around you aesthetically, or yeah. But I think it's also very hard for me to separate from like finding a place in Oslo, but I feel very at home at Tenthaus, so that has helped a lot. And we have a message, we're running out of time. So that's
I was just going to say before we close, what you're talking about is like there's holes in things that you can't see. That's exactly what happens. Like I've worked in schools as a teacher for years, and you start at a new school and it's really, really weird, because when you go to school, you think everything is really well organized. And then you walk into a classroom and you realize nobody really knows what they're doing. And all they ever talk about is the kids, you know. So I really love teachers because they love our kids, you know. All they ever do is talk about them. And all the administrative stuff, there's somebody else doing that. And, you know, you're saying, but why do we do it this way? And everybody will say, no, we don't know why, but like, we just got to get on with it because we've got to teach the kids. You know, that's the focus. And I think that's the thing with like the becoming institution, you know, that you will have these holes, and it's difficult to understand how it all fits together because nobody really knows. You know, it all fits together because it's all through the same people or the same place, but why and how. And I think that's one of the critiques that we can have towards schools. I mean, they've had the same form since the priests were doing it in the 12th century. Exactly the same way of teaching. So I think, you know, we can ask questions of ourselves about these holes, but also about schools and other institutions, like how that works.
We're probably going to run out of time, but do you think the schools you work with have changed because of Tenthaus in any way?
Well, I think Hasleppskola, when we started working with that particular school, Ebba and Stefan, we were in there, and it was like, this is just like a Stasi fängsel. You know, it was like a prison. There was nothing on the wall. It was great. It was awful. And everybody was really interested in art, but they also thought we were going to do something in clay. That was like, that's really interesting, because when we go in there now, I mean, there's art and artists all over the place. We never know who we're going to meet. We meet colleagues there all the time. And there's like, we have no control over what's going on anymore, you know, and we don't have like enerett to say so ever, but it would be really nice to know what's going on, you know, because we have actually, through our work there, influenced the idea of what artists can do and what art can contribute to into the school. So it would be nice to have a bit better communication, but that's not just the school, that's probably us as well.
Great. Should we wrap up?
We wrap. Nice seeing you guys, especially nice seeing you in Bergen.
No, I think this is really nice for me, just to hear more about, like, this is what doesn't happen when you're always working on the next thing, to hear more about what you're up to.
And it's like well, we really do miss, I think, the social aspect. I mean, because that's when all this like old knowledge transfer first happened, is like in the coffee, and when you're having a beer or whatever. Now we're just stuck in these Zoom windows. It's like, are you guys really there, or your holograms?
Maybe we should talk a bit about what we were talking before about we understand that there are institutions that they see themselves as the window to the world for its local community, and maybe that's something that we do differently, that we'd find ourselves being a window to our window of our local community to the world. We start from being part of that community, and I mean, that's since we are a part of that community, we know maybe who are we not talking for, who are we missing, what do we need to do to include, and what do we need to bring from the artistic world into that community, and how that community can feed the artistic project. So I think I think maybe the starting point is what makes the most difference from that approach. And I understand that when you say that the art institution are struggling with reaching their communities, it's the distance between the institution and the communities is too big, and maybe it's the institutional structure and the hierarchy of the institutions that make it very difficult for the communities to feel that they have a place or a voice in those institutions, or to feel that you don't have to be an expert, a knowledgeable voice to
have an interaction with that institution.
And yeah, and there's something about the long-term work also, that is not sort of a quick fix, but also that the relationship doesn't come after, but during and whilst the projects are happening somehow. So it's also a time thing. Maybe.
So like the way that I see it is that how they start, like how the Tenthauses start working as this engagement with the school is not kind of an initiation or a starting point, but also is kind of carried out during the whole time, or it becomes part of the characteristic and identity of Tenthaus, which was like this long relation, long-term approaches towards the community that they are working for. So maybe in the beginning it was only the schools, and then when they shift from the schools to the current location for the gallery, but they are starting to have kind of maybe trying to have keeps this connection to locals as well. And then also this is the kind of wish that also comes with the practice, you know, like when we were talking about that, what is gonna be the future of the Tenthaus, what we are going to go, we were thinking about how we can keep these relationship with the people that they are part of this community and they are part of Tenthaus. So even when we were thinking about moving from this current location to the other location, the first concern for all of us, it was that where we're gonna go and in which place, if we are gonna go, we're gonna keep this involvement. And even we kind of following the community to go too close to them rather than just like going somewhere and dragging them towards us. So I kind of see it that how this way of thinking and practicing, it becomes part of the identity of the Tenthaus, which is also practiced in every project, like sometimes with the kids in the school and also like in the artistic practice. So as you were talking about this role of like a vitrine or showing, or like a kind of vice versa.
Yeah, sorry.
No, go, you go.
No, I think it's like the past few months have been really interesting, like you're saying, Shah, about looking at how to expand, or not expand actually, but to further kind of ground this the words are hard to find, but you know, how to kind of put our feet even more down on the ground. It almost feels like, okay, we're in the basement now, but this location discussion that we've been having about being kind of closer to the everyday life of the students, like being on the skolevei of the kids, has really made it interesting for me, that this wish to be a place where people can pop in and out rather than a place that has this threshold to pass to get into. And I think that's the art world has this really big threshold that even me who works with the arts find it sometimes hard to go into a white cube gallery. And I'm thinking, am I welcome? Is it open? Is it for invited people only? Or, you know, and so I think that's an interesting thing to try to demolish, this tiny little threshold that is just a doorstep, really.
Yeah, because we even though we want to move even more in the urban context, we are in a very urban context, and and we are close to the schools we work, but still it's difficult for them to come, and it might be because how our the building is made, or it could be that it's not accessible enough because
because of this threshold that you were talking about. But it's it's also, I think it's even we are urban and even we are freer of some political rules, we are not freer of the aesthetical rules. So I think even when we try to make this space a free space for people to come and don't feel judged, but if, when we talk and we ask about how it is to come to Tenthaus, how it is to go out, how it is, people feel that it is difficult, that it's not an easy, simple thing to do. So what we're doing right now, as the question is, how are you doing this as an institution? What are your goals? We're trying to figure out how to do it even more accessible. So that's where we are working right now. We're researching and talking and working with the fact that we are accessible enough, but not enough. We want to be even more, and we wanted to try to do this as a natural way. So that's why if we are in the school way to the kids, like, is it natural for them to come and see, hey, is it natural for the parents to come and see what they're doing? Is it natural for artists to see what the kids of school are doing while they're in the institute? So that's what we're researching now, and that's Shah has this really nice series and strategies about the heterotopias, and maybe Shah, you want to talk a bit about that, and then we maybe go to the next question.
Yeah, the idea of heterotopia comes through the time that we were researching to kind of approach more local community in the Grönland area, which is a lot of the students that we are working with, they are living there with their families. So it was also interesting that maybe the disengagement with the Tenthaus comes and starts with the kids, but it's kind of also kind of extend to the families, because we were thinking, it's not just the kids, they are living there with their families, maybe they are coming toward us. And then we were thinking about having a communal space, a place that like this, the project room or a project buildings, that we can have different projects or approaches or workshops or whatever. And then the idea of heterotopia comes about when I was thinking about the Tenthaus, and then like what kind of project we are doing, and how the whole Tenthaus is like a kind of big entity, and then this is a small project, it comes and goes and changing. And then also the idea of like utopia, utopia is not approachable, and then it's in case the heterotopia is this other places that is something between reality and utopia, and then trying to kind of, but this is the place of negotiation, and this is the place of change, and this is the place of thinking. So so yeah, it was like, as Mechu said, that we have like this relationship with the locals and with the communities, but we feel that it can be even more. And even it's not that some ideas that we are practicing in one aspect of Tenthaus, but we were thinking about that in a broader way. Like, for example, in the different, so we add this radio program, and then later we think that about this idea of what we're gonna do with the social media, like when we were talking about the social media, and how maybe instead of like working on that, we should focus more in the local and the practical engagement with the locals rather than have this space. So I think that this is a kind of constant and continuous thinking and way of working, or a kind of goal or vision for us to try to everyday practice how we can become a little bit more closer to that.
Hi, I'm Gabo Kamnitzer.
Hi, I'm Mehdi Torkaman.
First, we want to thank Bergen Kunsthall and Tenthaus for the invitation. So today we're going to be talking about the Camouflage Society, a project we organized at Tenthaus in 2018.
Camouflage Society was a summer school for young immigrants in Oslo that we organized with 6 young people from the local area, found through an open call through Hashlab VGS. The participants were Simon Rezaneh, Wari Paiz, Hamza Mohammed Ali, Farah Al-Gul, Huda Al-Gul, and Maha Al-Gul. For the project, we decided to try to destabilize some of the assumptions underlying integration education in Scandinavia, and more specifically, the way art is often used in these contexts as a tool of assimilation. Our goal was not to introduce the participants to art, but to see how they could use artistic strategies for their own purposes.
The Camouflage Society questioned an education that takes the existence of the other for granted, rather than treating it as an inevitable byproduct of the dominant culture. In other words, rather than focusing on fitting into Norwegian society, participants in the Camouflage Society experimented with methods of eluding its grasp and exceeding the constituting projections of its representational logic. The Camouflage Society was a mode of doing participatory research into the strategies of assimilation at play in the Norwegian socio-political context.
Assuming the name of a collective of civilian artists who developed methods of concealment during World War I, we experimented with modes of transformation through a series of exercises, discussions, and projects exploring cultural hegemony, representation, magic, and animal coloration. We sought to subvert the idea of a bounded Norwegian society, as well as the idea of the body as self-contained. In this image, we are receiving lessons from a magician.
One of the first things we did as a group was to have an open-ended conversation about hierarchies in different areas of social life. We did this while passing around a ball of clay. This served as a hands-on approach to building and maintaining trust, and to show that just as clay invites the hands to shape it, discourse can also be shaped. The task was, again, less about the end result, but more of a dialogical process through which we began to trust our collective shape as a group of researchers.
Trust has a lot to do with touch, a material intimacy to something malleable that responds to the force you exert on it, juxtaposed with words said or unsaid, created this material semiotic space. We began by speaking through our hands and learning to trust the clay and our contingent expressions, whomever that may come from.
For another activity, we made camouflage suits together, then wore them as we navigated the city as a plural body. This allowed us to short-circuit the distinction between presence and absence. At the time, Denise Ferreira de Silva's idea of difference without separation was very much on our minds. She speaks of the plenum, a notion that views all bodies as part of a larger body that can't be atomized. Importantly, here, acknowledging difference between parts need not suppose separation.
In this instance, our lack of visibility could be interpreted as a disruption and opening of space, rather than as enforced visibility, or bounded transparency, as Da Silva calls it. This play and the reactions it provoked occurred as a form of silent negotiation with other bodies and objects in the city, a negotiation within which our loss of individual identity had given us the upper hand and a power to make claims to public space.
Another activity consisted of the participants using stencil cutouts of their bodies to take photographs of the city through. Here, camouflage became not only a means of concealment, but a way of becoming one with the milieu. Today, we also recognize in this activity the happy echoes of Jef Geys' work with the I-form and his general interest in camouflage.
With the stencils, I particularly remember one photo Hamza had taken of the royal castle. Devoid of one's body, one's explicit absence on the stencil enabled a mode of presence that the participants documented in their photos. Something like being the place instead of being in a place. Every year on the 17th of May, on the very spot that Hamza took this photo, Norwegians parade in their bunad, their traditional attires, and wave to the royal family with one hand while waving the flag of their country with the other.
At the end of the workshop, all of the participants created works that reflected on our experiences together. These works, as well as material and documentation from our activities, later comprise an exhibition at Tenthaus.
In closing, we will show an example of one of the final works, this one made by Simone Raisonnet. In this video, Simone engaged with the tension between different conceptions of time that he experiences in Norway.
Skal du måle? Liksom her i midten. Løp den litt. En til her.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Because I think we already talked a little bit about this, about the two-way relationship and also the time aspect of how long you collaborate with someone, that it's not just in and out, a quick art workshop kind of, and this is what's interesting about Tenthaus in all projects, that it's really focusing on who the art is for, who it's by, and who it's with. Like it's not it's sort of directing itself towards a public that is perhaps not the usual art public, or in the process and in the results somehow.
Yeah, because that's exactly what I was thinking. We have support. We have support of the government. I mean, we have grant support, right? We apply for money and we get some the money, and we have the support of the schools and we have the support of the community, but part of the artistic milieu. And I think it's because I think it's uncomfortable because we disregard most of the rules of contemporary art, and I think we are aware of that, but we still do, because maybe it's more important to build the community and to be part of the community than to follow the rules of aesthetics and contemporary, what it means to be a contemporary art institution. Mm-hmm. So I think that's something that happened, but it's also we disregard who art is directed to. it's not it's the purpose of Tenthaus. We do this because we want to do this, but it's not the purpose that you leave any other people behind. But I think people feel left behind or feel that they don't understand as well, because it's not, we're not obviously working towards the art public. So I think maybe that's one of the things that we can talk about that. And as Axel said, I had made the differentiation between us, what we do in schools, and the COES and formidling or mediation, because I feel that the one is that the COES is a very in and out thing, and we build a relationship through years, many years, with the schools and with the students, and we don't show an art project. They are part of an art project. They are participate in the process, and they are medvirken. How is it? How is it? The name medvirken?
Contributing or
yeah.
And
I think it's we have wondered why is this disregard for a while, but maybe we just we are not longer using our time in this. But what we're using our time, and what I'm going to go back to what Axel said about that I had this thing with the COES and formidling. The COES thing is a time-based and relationship-based, and who is part of the process. And the formidling thing is, I think it's the mediation. It's this word that you are going to help or help the other to understand the exhibition or art or the performance, or but I feel that this mediation is not working because it's built from a wall, and they're making holes for the groups to see through, and they already decided what part is dedicated to this group.
I think it's a very important thing to think and to talk about the role of the institution or organization when we are talking about this, like community-based art or community art. You know, like when we are going to expose something on them, like in a way that we are thinking that we are going to engage them, but still we are not thinking in a flat way, because we are coming from outside and then putting some programs or plans or exhibition or something for them. Or as you said, we're trying to not give anything, but we try to just be there to in case that they need something, you know, like if they are going to, what is exactly their need, what they are thinking. Do they really need some art, or they don't need, you know, whatever. So I think that is also very important, that it should be always think about and be aware that what is the role of us as an institution. Are we going to give something to the people or decide for them, or just like a kind of exposing some kind of project on them, or we try to just be there in case that somebody needs something. And I think that is also, it can be explained in a different levels. Like, for example, maybe we are these to be there, like as a to be there between the artist and the school, or like if it's in the community. So I think that for every time that we are working with different groups and community and target, then we can have a different strategies to think about.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, you're muted.
I also think that it could be it might be that I have this thing with the formidling. It's because I see that maybe the like it's I don't know, that it's a trend or it's like a goal that they're trying to reach the other, you know, they're trying to reach the diversity and I think it's a very complicated way to do it that way, because if you don't include the other in the process of the making of the exhibition, then they're the punchline, and then there will be like maybe the end product or the they come only at the end of the how are we going to approach the diaspora, how are we going to approach the urban community, so how and you're not going to approach them if it comes as an afterthought. It's impossible to approach somebody who will immediately feel that in your process they were not part from the beginning. They just came as like, oh yes, and we said that we were going to have a workshop with this school or that group or that. So I think and this is what I was thinking, this is what maybe Daniela Ramos is trying to do, and the Pedagogías Empáticas are trying to do, is just to understand the fact that if you don't take groups in your starting point, if you don't include them from the sea of the idea, then they will not be able to see themselves or to approach this project with something else than a lot of with distance. Like I will come here and I will listen you to talk about this, and I'm never going to be representative in this project or in this kind of institution. So I think it's maybe if the mediation program is still still takes part of the institution as the afterthought, then it's going to be a complicated thing. And maybe that's the biggest difference between what we're doing in Tenthaus. We don't have a mediation program, but we include our community from the idea, from the start point, because are included in what Tenthaus is. So we might fail, or we might not represent everybody, and we might not include everybody, but at least, I mean, there is such a structural part of the institution that we will at least have them and have this ourselves as others, and try to mirror whatever we are feeling or whatever we are trying to communicate or have experience. Or so it might be that the C or the idea, and this big gap between what the curatorial departments are doing and what the formidling and mediation departments are doing, that if one is coming as the afterthought, it will not work well with the community.
The project Teatro del Incomprendido, or Theater of the Misunderstood, took place at Tenthaus in the summer of 2018. My interest in Norway was multifold. As someone who comes from performance, I have been interested in the rich theater tradition best exemplified by the work of Henrik Ibsen, one of the founders of modernism in theater, and of course of the concept of realism in theater as well. I wanted to ask, as part of these projects, what does realism look like in 2018? Using the tools of critical pedagogy, and in particular the work of Augusto Boal, I proposed a series of workshops with local artists, representative of the rich and diverse immigration of contemporary Oslo, to explore the idea of misunderstanding, lack of empathy, and mistrust, topics that lie at the core of social and cultural conflicts. Norway, needless to say, would appear to an outsider like me to be the last place needed for a case study of inequity, given that it is in so many respects admired for having one of the highest standards of living, health, and education in the world. But it was precisely that condition that made me interested in understanding the inner conflicts that exist within individuals and the society at large that perhaps are not always expressed or articulated. The notion of misunderstanding, being misunderstood, was explored in various ways. In a more direct form, it is a feeling that every individual experiences and many times is not able to resolve. We all have felt misunderstood at some point in our lives, either because of our set of beliefs or because our actions, things that we have said or done, are interpreted in a way that we not intend them for them to be interpreted that way. There are small misunderstandings, longer-term interpersonal misunderstandings, as in conflict or in a relationship with a family, and collective misunderstandings, as in political, religious, or ideological positions and debates. The project also explored the notion of misunderstanding from a cognitive standpoint. In education, the subject of explanation is intrinsic to learning, as it is the process by which ideas are made clear and understood. Yet the process of explanation is subject of interpretation and discussion, and in art, in particular, very fraught, which is often explored in the field of museum education and interpretation. In the workshops, we did a number of exercises often used in sociology, geared to allow participants to reflect from the perspective of another, engaging, for example, in a party where they were assigned a secret specific identity which they had to perform without telling others who they were. And then with a specific attribute written in a piece of paper in the back, outlining a fictional secret aspect of their personality without their knowledge, but that others can see, so that it would influence the way they would interact with that person. The disconnect in the interaction between what we know about others, who we think we are, and how we see ourselves becomes a very meaningful experience as a result of these kind of activities. Later on, the participants were encouraged to reflect on this experience and also write a letter outlining why and how they felt misunderstood by others. The letters were later read at a live event that was offered to the public, accompanied by other pieces, theater pieces that focus on the social dynamics of the art world and the role itself of the artist, as well as other activities, and a performance of Latin American protest music. In summary, Teatro del Incomprendido tried to highlight in various ways how widespread misperceptions of individuals can be, and that misunderstanding can be many different kinds. It can be ethnic, racial, religious, gender-based, and others, and the ways in which art making and the process of performance and socially engaged art can help us to gain better understanding of these processes.